When it comes to nostalgia and retro gaming, one of the most popular names that come to mind is Atari. Atari was founded in 1972 by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, and in episode 27 I talked about their very first arcade game called Pong that helped establish the video game industry, as well as the lawsuit that ensued from it. Atari continued to develop arcade games such as Space Race, Gotcha, Rebound, Tank, Highway, and many more. But the development cost and limited lifespan drove CEO Nolan Bushnell to seek a programmable home system, and in 1975 Atari designed the Atari Video Computer System, or VCS, which was eventually renamed the Atari 2600. The console sold for $199 US, representing $1,096 US, $1,414 Canadian, and €1,076 in today's economy. It included 2 joysticks, a pair of paddles, and a combat game cartridge. Looking for investors to help bring the machine to market, Bushnell sold Atari to Warner Communications in 1976 for around $30 million, and the 2600 was released in North America in September 1977, but with only 9 available titles. After several disagreements with Warner over the direction and discontinuing the 2600, Bushnell quit and mutually was fired from Atari in December 1978. In 1980, Atari licensed the first arcade game called Space Invaders, developed by Taito. This move quadrupled the system's sales and went on to sell over 5.6 million copies of the game by 1982. This was the company's best-selling game until the release of Pac-Man in March of 1982. While being considered one of the worst video games ever made because of poor visuals, sound, and bearing little resemblance to the original arcade game, it became Atari's best-selling video games for the 2600, selling over 8 million copies. It was shortly followed by Miss Pac-Man, which was acclaimed by critics for its improvements over the original gameplay and was listed among the greatest video games of all time. The Atari 2600 became widely successful, leading to the founding of Activision, which developed the game Pitfall, as well as other third-party game developers, and to competing consoles manufactured by Mattel and Coleco. In 1982, the Atari 2600 was the dominant game system in North America, but a number of poor decisions from Atari management affected the company and the industry as a whole, and ended Atari's relevance in the console market, and its downfall resulted in the video game crash of 1983. Following the crash, the company was sold off in 1984 and split into 2 entities, and much has happened to Atari and the Atari name over the years, but throughout all of this, the Atari 2600 console continued to sell until it was discontinued in January of 1992, having sold over 30 million consoles. While according to the service manuals there are over 16 big and small revisions of the motherboards throughout the years, and while Sears sold them through its Sears Telegames, in which there were changes to the packaging and naming of the console, 4 basic models were made. The first was the original 6-switch model that is commonly known as the Heavy Sixer for its 6 prominent aluminum switch levers on the control panel, and the fact that it was manufactured with heavy aluminum radio frequency shielding and a half-inch thick plastic bottom. You can also recognize them by their curved molding on the front of the unit and of course their heavy weight. There are 2 different Heavy Sixers, one with a switch accessible via a hole in the bottom to select the TV output for channel 2 or 3, and another without the switch that can output to channel 3 only. And yes, there are different branded ones for Sears, but the hardware remains the same. These Heavy Sixers were manufactured in Sunnyvale, California. The second is known as the Light Sixer. It has very minor differences which improve on the board's design, but a thinner and more sharply angled molding, reducing some of the weight. However, it retained the heavy RF shielding. Atari moved its manufacturing overseas after the production of the Heavy Sixer to reduce cost, so some early models of the Light Sixer were still made in Sunnyvale, California, and the rest were manufactured overseas. And again, Atari also produced the Light Sixer for Sears, which had some minor aesthetic differences to the Atari branded consoles. The third is the 4-switch model that retained much of the same plastic moldings as the Light Sixer, by having moved 2 of the aluminum switches that set the difficulty levels from the top to the back of the console. Inside, the 2 board connected with a ribbon cable was replaced by 1 motherboard, and the controller ports were moved from the lower back to the upper back of the console. These were manufactured overseas. The last one was introduced in 1982 and dubbed Darth Vader. It was the first console to actually use the 2600 in its name, as the previous models all used Video Computer System. The wood grain was removed, and additional cost-cutting and more advanced manufacturing was done to the motherboard. These were also manufactured overseas. Now there's a 5th one depending on if you consider the 2600 Junior as being a different console or a newer redesigned version of the 2600. It was a smaller, further cost-reduced form factor with a modernized appearance. It was advertised as a budget gaming system under $50 with the ability to run a large collection of classic games. The Atari 2600 console was so successful in the 70s and 80s that the Atari name became synonymous for the console in the media and video games in general and was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame in 2007. It was also named the number 2 console of all time by IGN, who proclaimed it to be the console that our entire industry is built upon. The console even got a successful nostalgic re-release and getting another one soon, and the 2600 clones remain on the market to this day. There's no denying that this console truly is an important part of our video game history, and I recently acquired what is referred to as a Light Sixer made in Sunnyvale, California. I have no idea if it works, but I'd like to try to restore it. If I'm lucky, I'll reap the fruits of my labor and get to play with this Pac-Man. Hello everyone and welcome, I'm the Retro Repair Guy. So a couple of people wrote to me and asked me, is everything okay, am I still here? Which is nice, I guess, because they want to see my content and they look forward to it. But you know, first of all, yes, I'm still around, and in 2.5 months from now, it's going to mark 2 years that I'm on YouTube. So I think I'm showing you that I'm more than committed here, and I'm in it for the long haul, as they say. So me and Mrs. RG aren't going anywhere. We're sticking around. And aside from that, you know, of course, it takes time to do the restoration. So I was bringing you these 5-minute videos in between is when I have time. But the thing is that, you know, ordering the parts, fixing it, filming it, and I don't just stand in front of a camera and talk and that's it. You know, I do a lot more, as you know, for my shows, and they're 35 minutes long. There's some history, there's a lot of stuff to do. I'm not excusing it, I'm just telling you that it takes time. And at the same time, you know, it's baby RG's birthday, so, you know, Daddy's been promising to build a swing set, and, you know, I put together a trampoline, a lot of stuff, so that was nice, and I had to do my daddy duties, of course. Another thing also, by the way, I wanted to mention, I keep forgetting, that, you know, we don't do live streams, so I don't have like super chats. But what I have is kind of these super comments. There's a bottom, at the bottom, there's a button that says thank you, and you can put sort of like whatever amount you want to help support the channel, and it puts like you know, a super comment so that you know, it sticks out from everyone else. So I just wanted to tell you that I keep forgetting to mention it. There's going to be also a 3,000 subscriber giveaway. So that's going to be important. So of course, you know, subscribe and hit the notification bell to know about that, because I'll be announcing all the details. Going to be 3,000 subscribers, which is coming up quite soon enough, because it goes fast. It's exponential now. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, yeah, so aside from that, today I got a 2600 Light Sixer. So the Light Sixer, as they call it, was made in Sunnyvale, California. Not all of them, as I explained in the beginning, but this one was. It's exactly the same thing as the original one, except that the casing is a little bit thinner and sort of angled, but everything else is the same. So I was happy to get my hands on it. And it wasn't quite, you know, poor condition. Well, not horrible, but it was poor. So I'm very happy to get my hands on it. And without further ado, let's just jump right in and see what we can do with it. This video is sponsored by Pixabay, an exceptional manufacturer of printed circuit boards of all types. They make top quality PCBs from your Gerber files starting at only $5. Whether you're in need of getting your own PCBs manufactured with reasonable prices for production runs, or simply a one-off prototype PCB, they offer excellent quality and unsurpassed service to help you with your designs and free online quotes. With quick turnaround times and fast delivery, I definitely recommend checking them out. The link is in the description below. I purchased this off an online auction site a couple of months ago for only $30. It was a Sixer that was made in Sunnyvale, California, and seemed to be in pretty good shape, with 4 controllers, 2 paddles, a video touchpad, and a game cartridge. I purchased so many things, and the listing has been erased, so I don't recall if the seller stated it was in working order or not, and if a power supply was supposed to be included, because I don't see one in the box. Luckily, I have a spare one on hand that I had picked up from the thrift store on one of my frequent visits. I plugged one of the controllers in and popped in the cartridge, but only got an orange screen. I tried all the buttons just to see if it was reacting to anything. I even tried to wiggle the cartridge to see if it had any effect on the image. I tried pulling out and then reseating the cartridge, but it was more of the same. The reset button was unresponsive, and turning it on and off would display a different color or bars in different locations. I tried Mrs. RG's favorite, Miss Pac-Man, but the same orange screen appeared. I had trouble pulling out the cartridge, so at least I see the cartridge port is gripping the cartridge properly. I think it's time to open it up. After visually inspecting the boards for any damage or burnt components, I tried to unscrew the plastic cartridge port cover to make cleaning easier, only to find out this was all one piece and would have to be desoldered, so I decided to leave it in place. I began by desoldering the small axial capacitor to the side. Once removed, I cleaned the holes to make sure the insertion of the new one is easy. I have many of this value in stock, but in radial form. There's plenty of space on the board, so there's no need to order just one in an axial form. I simply bent the legs of the radial to align with the holes. After soldering it and cutting the excess from the legs, I made sure the solder had gone through the hole, as it's a double-sided board. So from the other side, I added a drop on each side. I wanted to test the old one, so I added a small piece of wire so that the legs can reach the holes of the tester. This 4.7 microfarad capacitor was testing at 2.6 microfarad with 82 ohms of resistance. It clearly had surpassed its lifetime. I normally don't bother changing mylar, also known as film capacitors, unless they are blown, because they normally have a very long lifespan under normal conditions. However, there are only 6 total on the 2 boards, and this unit is nearing 50 years, and as a game console it might have seen hours upon hours of use over the years. I opted for Nishikon's KAIWEETS line that have superior resistance to heat and humidity, as well as suited for commercial and industrial applications. Perfect for this Atari game console. The soldering joints of the cartridge port did not look amazing. With all of the heat, pulling and pushing on it over the years, it might have caused cold or cracked solder joints, so while I'm here, I'm resoldering every joint of the cartridge port. And as usual, the board is extremely dirty, so I removed the socketed ICs to prepare the board for the good old dishwasher before I continued with the rest. So I've talked a lot about capacitors in the past and voltages, etc., etc. I just want, and I might have quickly mentioned this before, but I just want to quickly mention again. So axial, okay, they're in the horizontal form, and radial, they're sticking out. Okay, so there's absolutely no difference. It's like this or it's like that. Okay, they're both electrolytic capacitors. They both do the same thing, etc., etc. The reason for them, a lot of times it's design. Casing is thinner, so you don't want, oops, you don't want it sticking up. You want it, lying down so the case could fit. All kinds of reasons, right? Could have been cost issues back in the 80s too, wherever they got parts. Oh, we could get these cheaper, so fine, put it this way. And I say that because the Atari had plenty of space, so there's no reason to put a tiny capacitor like that lying down. So anyway, all that to say that I mostly always keep things original, and if they're, especially for space issues, whatever. But I do replace them with more powerful ones because obviously today they're made a lot more, a lot smaller. However, I just want to tell you that there was plenty of space, so I just put these instead. There was only 2 of them. They were lying down like that, and they were this small. This is how small it is. So it might look bigger when you're close up, but it's really tiny. And it was lying down, so I just put one like that because I wasn't going to order. I have, maybe 100 of these. I wasn't going to order 2 just because they're lying down. It didn't make any sense. So all I did is spread the legs and reshape them, and it went right in because it comes with long legs, right? It's exactly the same. So I just want to, clarify that. The other thing I want to clarify is film capacitors. Now, film capacitors, which are also known as mylar sometimes, different components inside and stuff. Because if you go to a site like DigiKey, you look for a mylar capacitor. There is no such thing. It's a film capacitor. Okay. So all I want to say about that is that normally these could have like, I hate to say, but it could have 50 to 100 years without really being changed. Okay, and I know I'm going to get comments about that. I'm just saying they could. All right, depending. A lot more than these. These will have a 15 to 20 year lifespan and they dry out. However, depending, again, this is depending on use, depending on this and that, especially in a game console. And there weren't 100 of these. There was just a couple of them. And as you'll see or have seen, when you test them, it's still, even though it didn't lose voltage loss, it had some resistance. So I did change, and I think I did good to change them because, it's a game console. It heats up a lot. It gets played a lot. So it's not in a normal setting. So film capacitors, we can talk about those another time, but they are made a little bit differently, but they're not ceramic. And like I said, they still do have a lifespan. So that's why I opted to change them, especially there was only 6 of them. So, you're talking about a couple dollars, $2 while you're there, and, 10 minutes extra time. So anyways, that's what I want to tell you. The boards are out of the dishwasher and they look practically brand new. I started by removing the large axial capacitor. I already had a spare one in my parts case from Vichy, rated for 10,000 hour lifespan and a higher heat tolerance of 105 degrees. The voltage regulator is a standard 7805 that is extremely popular and can be found in the Commodores, NES and Sega systems and many more. So naturally, I keep a few of those in my case. I'm replacing it with a brand new, good quality one made by Texas Instruments. I cleaned up the old thermal paste from the heatsink pad and applied new thermal paste to the new voltage regulator. As mentioned on the previous board, I'm changing the only one film capacitor on the board with a new one from Nishikon. and while the old one kept its value and had no voltage loss, it showed 12 ohms of resistance compared to the new one that has a negligible 0.8 ohms. For the last Axial one, it was at the same value as the Axial on the other board, and here again, there was plenty of space to put a radial cap. I replaced it with an audio capacitor from Nichicon rated for 50 volts as opposed to the 35 volt that was installed. When I removed the old one and compared it with the other board, it was then I realized that by mistake I had installed a 25 volt on the other board and not 50. It was probably mixed in and I didn't double check. So I removed it again and installed a 50 volt capacitor, and at the same time I added some shrink tubing to the leg that was crossing over one of the traces on the board. While there is coating on the board, this will prevent any possibility of shorting. I then cleaned all the switches with electrical contact cleaner. I thought it was done, but the little tuner caught my curiosity and I wanted to peek inside. I tried to open it, it was then I realized it had to be completely unsoldered, so I did that and opened it up. There were no caps inside, only a few resistors and an IC. While I was there, I figured I should clean it with 99% alcohol and a soft toothbrush before reinstalling it. Lastly, I sprayed all the IC sockets and cartridge port with electrical contact cleaner. Oh, and I also went over all the suspicious looking solder joints, which for me ends up being most of them. And of course, I resoldered all the joints of the 6 switches. It was then time to reassemble the unit and see if I can collect my reward. So I don't talk often about transistors or voltage regulators. So this was the voltage regulator that was inside. Okay, very, very common little thing. It's a 7805. Now 7805 is a voltage regulator that is found in everywhere. Okay, 7805, 7812 actually, both of them. You will find like the drum machine that I fixed had a 7805, 7812. The Commodores, 7805, 7812. Some VIC-20s, 7805. The Sega Genesis, the Nintendo NES that I fixed, they have these. So if you're going to get into fixing anything retro, old gaming console, stuff like that, get yourself at least 10 of each, 7805, 7812. Now, the thing is that aside from when it's not working, sometimes I choose to change them. Like I didn't change them in the Sega. From what I remember, they were, from Texas Instrument and a few good places. The other one, I forget what it was. But anyways, they were good. Sometimes, though, they were getting parts from a little bit everywhere for cost, issues and whatever back in the 80s. So sometimes they're made in places that, well, let's just say the quality wasn't the same. So I do change them anyways for Texas Instrument. So obviously if it's broken, it's broken. But when it's not broken, that's how I gauge it. Where was it made and whatever. And I buy all the Texas Instrument one from DigiKey. And I'm not affiliated. I'm just telling you what I buy, okay? Now, aside from that, what's important here? This one, for example, 78M05. You run into that, you go, oh my God, what do I do, right? Now, I don't want to hear from the electronics guys who are going to argue with me on this or whatever. I'm saying this in layman's term, okay? Now, in layman's term, as I've explained to you, when you have a capacitor, for example, that's 10 or 25 volts, and you're replacing it with a 50 volt, kind of like that, right? It's okay as long as you got the same value. So I have tons of 7805 and 7812 in stock because I do this all the time. So 78M05 means it can go up to 500 milliamps, whereas a 7805 by itself without the M can go up to 1.5 amps. And that's it. That's all the difference between these two. So just to tell you, I changed it for 7805. So if ever get yourself a bunch of them and you run into an L and M or whatever, don't worry about it. As long as it's 7805, 7812, you can change them very easily. That's a little tip from me. Even after all these years, turning it on after such a big operation scares me. Well, success. The console turns on, and the combat cartridge that came with it seems to be working. I actually remember playing this tank game, and I also remember how frustrating it was. And the plain version is no different. But the true test will be Mrs. RG's favorite Miss Pac-Man. This is one console she won't tell me to get rid of. I must say, after all these years and having Pac-Man in my home theater, it still doesn't get boring. I have a couple other games for the Atari 2600, and Defender is also one I like very much. Contrary to the Combat Plane version, everything feels smooth. Well, all in all, I would call this a very successful restoration. Well, I hope you enjoyed the 2600 restoration. Let me know in the comments below. And by the way, Halloweens are on the corner. And so this year I actually built this little motherboard and had them done by Pixabay. I designed it on the computer as a ghost finder. Now, this Ghost Finder version 1.0 on it. We're going to have some fun. And if you haven't checked out my episode from last year, please check it out because for those of you who still don't believe, I did not edit those voices at the end. And they were all from the radio. All I did was boost them, clean them up. That's it. So believe whatever you want, but this was all true. So this year, we're going to have a little bit of fun. And I hope you'll join us for that. So, of course, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know as soon as I release it. If you want to support the channel, please head on over to retrorepairguy.com/support. And at the same time, there's some links in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I hope to see you very soon with the Halloween special. Bye-bye.